The main thing I knew I wanted to talk about today, it's been 2 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and we are not at a place of consensus as a culture. Abortion is very much on the ballot this year, or at least a lot of Democrats want that to be the main issue. A lot of Republicans want that to be the main issue. This is something that really divides the hearts of men and women across our country and increasingly across the world. Abortion was, of course, known, that came to great rise with the rise of modern medical technology, but also the eugenics movement saw that as an effective tool of controlling global populations, which it continues to be. There are millions, if not billions, of dollars spent abroad to help developing world people abort their babies and to control global populations. Of course, the American population has largely been controlled through the use of abortion, and it's I think the moral issue of our time. It's something that uh, there are a lot of people who say, Christians, we don't need to be political. There are good people on both sides of this issue. We can live and let live on this issue in the church. And I don't have tolerance for that voice anymore. I think that the people who make provision for killing babies in the womb have had their consciences seared. I think that it's a morally untenable position to hold that under any circumstance you can willingly terminate the life of a child in the womb. And a lot of people immediately go to extremes whenever they hear something like that said. What about, oh heck, what's it called? Whenever the baby implants in the ovarian tube and it's not going to work, there's no way it can work out. There are medical situations, they're rare, they're very rare, but they do happen where the mother and the baby cannot survive together. There is no condition in which you have to murder that baby. There are, uh, I'm saying the things that don't get said enough in the public sphere. Um, in all events, you can remove a baby with literal or with very little risk to the mother. And whenever we look at countries where it is illegal to kill babies in the womb through abortion, there are not higher maternal mortality rates. So Malta would be an example where actually maternal mortality rates are great generally in advanced countries that have no legal abortion. This is something where Americans want to pretend we're the only country in the world. We can't do this comparative analysis. We can. We can. I wanted to turn y'all on to Lyla Rose. I think she's a fantastic person. She's the head of Live Action, which is an anti abortion nonprofit. She used to do like undercover work to show how much the sex trade, sex industry is contingent upon getting abortions for women in sex slavery. Um, she's now a mother and a Christian and a public voice against abortion. Here's a post that she made yesterday on Twitter. In the wake of the historic overruling of Roe v. Wade, our nation's worst injustice, 14 states have near total abortion bans. Amazingly, over 144,000 children's lives have been saved. The pro life movement is more galvanized than ever. We will end abortion in my lifetime. Once upon a time, this would have sounded like a pie in the sky hope. In the 1960s, the U.S. Supreme Court made a number of decisions that threw this whole country towards the left in a big way. One of them was Roe v. Wade, which normalized and legalized abortion across the United States. Until 2022, over that course of time, over 30 million babies were aborted in this nation. So when you think about how, you know, uh, the moral landscape of Germany was so radically altered by the number of Jews that they killed. Of course, there is no comparative. You can't hold up Germany with its Jews against Germany without its Jews. You can't see what they would have looked like had they not killed those Jews. But you see a huge traumatic inability to cope in some ways with the the horrors of what happened in World War II, and a whole generation just mauled morally by their own actions. That's what's going on in America right now. We don't realize that all the depression and anxiety around us, that all of the the hatred around us, the self hatred, the animosity, that all of that. Do you ever deal with people that are just irrationally angry at you, and you realize, oh, they're not angry at me, they're angry at themselves. They've got something going on in their life. I'm not even real to them. That's what this country is going through right now. It's a bunch of people that are so traumatized and victimized by their own willful decisions, and then continually digging their heels in and going, no, I'm right, I'm right, I need to do this, you need to stop judging me for this. If you would just be quiet and stop judging me, then I would finally be okay. That is a lie from the evil one. The reality is that this country has been doing abominable things for a long time, the worst of which is abortion. And for that reason, I do believe that God has largely chosen not to bless America because we have turned from Him. He's given us over to ourselves. I do truly believe this. So, the things I knew I wanted to say today were there really is no reason whatsoever why we ever need to kill a baby in the womb. I wanted to make sure that I made the case that there is no other clear starting point of life other than the moment of conception. This is something that biologists and science agree on. This is one of those areas where, if you trust the science, you believe that a new human life is created at conception. And then, I just wanted to go down the tweet thread here, and then we'll look at an Associated Press article about abolitionists rising. I'll tell you who these guys are in a second, but he says it is very difficult to abolish abortion while pro-lifers keep on lying about their false victories and delude their people and deceive and divide them against abolitionists. So one of the things that's happening right now is, how the left has splintered in a lot of ways. The right is also splintering, and there is a group on the right called abolitionists. So there's pro-lifers that are generally more agreeable and reasonable with people in favor of abortion. They can argue about, at what point in gestation you can kill a baby, and maybe it's not so bad. That they can do kind of this back and forth about where can we sit on this continuum between absolutely no abortions and unlimited abortion. And abolitionists are against that. They say under no circumstances should there be any abortions ever. It's murder, it's morally reprehensible, and it's a shame on our country for doing it. So they have taken a very intolerant stance towards any positions that allow for abortion under any circumstances. Of course, abolitionism was known uh, originally as a political movement to end abortion, not abortion, slavery, to abolish slavery. And so they're saying just like slavery was the moral issue of its time, abortion is the moral issue of our time. We need to completely outlaw it if we're to stop not just killing babies, but stop killing our culture. Stop killing. If you don't know this, Margaret Sanger, one of the original eugenicists, was one of the biggest figures behind Planned Parenthood, and it's because of her and her moral clarity that there is a much higher concentration of abortion facilities inside of American minority communities, especially black communities. Black communities have been intentionally targeted by eugenicists and abortion industry for decades, and it's been very effective at demolishing the black population in certain areas. License to Breathe says, is 144,000 number real? So this is one of the things that's frustrating is getting good solid numbers right now is very difficult. Because depending on who studies it and what their agenda is, it's very hard to look at this stuff, especially in the time of home done abort. There's a word for it, but when you can order these pills to take that will abort your baby, how many people are doing that privately? Can we track that? This is one of the things that, as Lyla is rejoicing that 144,000 children's lives have been saved. On down here, there's another who says there are more abortions post Roe v. Wade. And that's something that I worry about because during Prohibition, I don't know how many people know this, alcohol consumption actually went up during Prohibition whenever it was outlawed. And so similarly, well, actually, I say that I haven't done that research. That's just one of the things I've heard from two or three people. So that could be an old wives' tale. I don't know. It could be propaganda. But there's been propaganda in this field, obviously, all the way along. In 1970s America, there was a couple medical professionals who came forward on behalf of Planned Parenthood, who said that if we outlaw abortion, there will be all kinds of back alley abortions that will have much higher maternal mortality rates. Came up with all these stats that he later admitted completely made up, totally false, not true at all. So this is something that's just really important for Christians to know about, because Christians, we serve the Lord of life, right? We speak the truth in love. And even though we cannot force our morality on people who don't share our moral framework, we actually kind of can. That's kind of the whole history of the Western society movement. It's Christians lovingly keeping their neighbors from killing their kids, you know? So, like him or hate him, Tucker Carlson is recently speaking with oh, I can't think of his name. He's a very articulate, very charismatic black dude, Everett something. And the two of them were just very clear that the modern abortion industry is an extension of child sacrifice to Molech. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. This guy, Everett, he was talking about in California, there is now legislation being proposed where you can terminate the life of a newborn child up to like the first month in California. Because he says it's because liberals have accepted the moral argument that a life begins at conception, and if you can abort up to sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth month of pregnancy, well, why not the 10th month after conception? Why not the 11th? And there are, I remember a very disturbing interview with the governor of Virginia, who talked about medical provisions for allowing newborn infants to die if it's the will of the parents. So these are the times we're living in. This is how morally compromised and seared our population is. There was a meme on here, and of course, memes are not always true, but it says more than 114,000 abortions happen every day. And if that's the state of affairs that we're living in, even if it's half that, if that's the state of affairs that we're living in America, then I can't help but think that that is very significant. And I feel like we all should be able to acknowledge that number is just unacceptable. I also think it's important to acknowledge that the materially poor in America today live better than the average people have throughout history. So this whole line about how if we want women to have babies, we need to materially improve their conditions, I think is disingenuous. Women and men have raised children in absolute poverty for millennia. And that's not to say it's easy or fun, but it is to say it can and should be done. That's just the way it's always been. And we do live in a very gracious society that is not going to let our children starve, that puts so much money into social care and welfare every year. It's not a real argument. You know, it's not a real argument to say, you know, like we shouldn't save these babies until we can make sure that they have a good life. You know, that's not the job of the state. That's not even the job of society. That's the job of parents. And yes, we need to improve the moral condition of parents so that they can raise children well. The first thing we can do to improve their moral condition is to help them stop killing their babies. So I'll put this link in the show notes, but this is an Associated Press article that was published, well, just the other day. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. Here's the state of abortion rights now in the U.S. So it talks about the difference in the political landscape. Abortion is now banned at all stages of pregnancy with limited exceptions in 14 Republican-controlled states. In 3 other states, it's barred after about the first 6 weeks, which is before many know they're pregnant. Most Democratic-led states have taken actions to protect abortion rights and become sanctuaries for out-of-state patients seeking care. So this would be a good thing for doing comparing and contrasting maternal mortality rates, infant health rates, longitudinal health studies, um, uh, mental health studies, except people can go between states very easily and do whatever they want to do. So a lot of these comparative studies are going to be ameliorated by the fact that people can uh, go around the law. So here's a map, an interactive map that you can look at if that's of interest to you. So it's changed the landscape of abortion access, making it more of a logistical and financial ordeal for many in conservative states, but it has not reduced the overall number of procedures done each month across the U.S. So I haven't checked that link. I don't know what it links to. Oh my gosh, these advertisements. So you can consult that if you want to. I'm not going to pretend to be an authority on the. To my mind, it doesn't matter what the actual, how effective a law is. I think in order for people to be moral, they have to pass moral laws. So, and I think there are limits to that. Like I think we clearly discovered that with prohibition, that could not be legislated. But with abortion, which is, well, when it was just a surgical procedure, it could be managed that way. I'm not sure now that we can make these pills. I don't know. I don't know. This is one of the things that I worry about. Um, the article is, well, here I'll do a little bit more. A new study by the Guttmacher Institute, which advocates for abortion access, found that just over 1 million abortions provided in clinics, hospitals, and doctors' offices, more than 161,000 or 16% were for people who cross state lines to get them. So yeah, that's going to be a huge issue, especially for these abolitionists who are trying to end the practice in their states, and they can't even clap themselves on the back whenever they pass good legislation because um, the people under their aegis are just going to go somewhere else. And so that's something that we're familiar with in the church. Whenever we want to maintain a high standard for our people, a lot of times they can just go to a lower standard church. It's the same thing in the U.S. So how on earth do you save a people? How on earth do you help a people bent on evil and destruction who will not um, allow themselves to be governed? And that's the issue of our time, especially right now. We are not just a rebellious people, but a stiff-necked and willful and sinful people who refuse to see themselves this way. And so there are a lot of people who've given up on the American project. Here's a final exhortation. I just don't think we can give up. I don't think we can give up on each other. I don't think, Jesus ever gives up on us. I think the witness of the gospel is out of love, we can continue. We should continue. We have to continue to speak the truth to one another. We have to continue to warn one another about the consequences of our actions. And we have to continue to push people to do better than they've done before. If all we're ever going to be is a reflection of who we have been, then yeah, this is a terrible world to live in. But we believe in repentance. We believe in conversion. We believe the world can change. The world has changed. And there's no reason why we need to be reactively or just passively dealing with things around us. There is a way to proactively engage the world around us, to refuse to allow things to degrade insofar as we have any authority over them, and to advocate. Here's the thing is when you've died to self, you live for God and others. Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. These are the two greatest commandments. And so as we learn to care, especially for the poor and needy, especially for those who cannot defend themselves, and no one is more vulnerable than children in the womb, we have no more important job here on earth than to advocate for those who are too weak, too vulnerable to advocate for themselves, and to wake people up who are so emotionally and morally compromised that they cannot feel the consequences of their actions. I'm fully aware that by talking about this, I alienate a lot of people. I had a lady on my Friday live stream with me a couple weeks ago saying, I want to go GMC, but There are too many people who are they're against abortion in there, and I'm for abortion, and that's just a deal breaker with me. And it made me really sad. I said, you should change your mind. You know, you're wrong. And I think what's going to be before the Global Methodist Church and anybody that wants to stand on integrity is we want everybody on board. We don't want to divide. Let's compromise. I don't think there can be any compromise on this issue. I think it is the moral issue of our time that it doesn't matter. None of the border doesn't matter. The federal budget doesn't matter. None of these other things matter until you get this right. Um, so I'm a one issue guy. I think you should be too. I think all of us should be. I think we should get this figured out, then the budget, then the border, and then any number of issues. So anyway, if you're not in the same place as me, just continue to pray about it. And if you are in the same place as me, then you might consider plugging into Live Action, Abolitionists Rising, looking at the ways that you can be a part of changing the moral landscape in our time, and consider the ways in which you can boldly and lovingly speak to people in your area of influence. This is something where people do change. People's minds do change when they look at what abortion entails, when they're lovingly invited to think about, okay, what constitutes the imago Dei, the image of God? What makes humans of sacred worth and worthy of defending and loving? Where does that begin and end? And to see how morally bankrupt the answer of the left is. You know, the answer of the left is it begins when the mother says it begins, and that is an untenable and morally reprehensible place to be, because mothers are fallen like the rest of us, and they make terrible decisions like the rest of us. So let's not let each other make these awful decisions that harm all of us. Let's fight for a future where the unborn are protected, and where we fight for the innocent and the defenseless. I'm glad you're watching my content. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me. If you think that what I'm doing is a good thing to support, a worthy project, and you appreciate my voice being a part of the mix, just want to encourage you to go over to Locals. Want you to consider supporting my work. Want you to consider following along and being a part of this effort that I'm facilitating to have good, responsible adult conversations out in the public. My ethics here are just around accountability, vulnerability, transparency. That's kind of what I'm about all the way through. So if you think that's a good thing worth supporting, not just for the Global Methodist Church, but just for the larger Christian discourse, pray about support my work. Appreciate it.